Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are around the world today. Welcome to today's Ask a Professional Scrum Trainer webinar. Today I am here with John Riley and Ben Thorp. They're here to answer all of your questions about Scrum and are happy to help with questions around regulating workflow effectively and developing a test-first mindset. Also happy to answer questions related to non-software related industries pertaining to Scrum. So hoping for some great questions and some really good discussion today. I'm Lindsay Vellicina. I am with Scrum.org and I will be your moderator. Oh, there we go. So some quick guidelines here before we get started. So you may have noticed your microphone is muted. However, that doesn't mean we don't want you to ask questions. That's why we are here. So please enter your questions into the Q&A box located at the bottom of your screen. This recording will be available within 24 hours. So if you need to leave for any reason or anything like that, there will be a recording made available to you. So please start, populating your questions as we get through these intro slides here. So really quick, who is Scrum.org? So we are the home of Scrum. We were founded by Ken Schwaber, the co-creator of Scrum, back in 2009. Our mission is helping people and teams solve complex problems through higher levels of professionalism. We offer training and certification in professional Scrum and have over 340 professional Scrum trainers around the globe teaching our courses, and also have our professional Scrum certifications to help you validate that knowledge that you gain. And we also have a bunch of free resources, and we encourage you to use those on our website. Webinars like these and learning paths as well. So please feel free to check those out. And I hope that today is an important asset that will help you on your learning journey. So with that, I would like to hand it over to John and Ben to introduce themselves.
Thank you, Lindsay. Hello, everyone, wherever you happen to be. My name is John Riley. I am based in the Columbus, Ohio area in the United States. I just want to express my gratitude for being part of this Scrum.org community event and the fact that there's just so much interest in Scrum, and to be able to see how you can effectively put it into practice. I am the principal Agile coach and trainer for Ready, Set, Agile, which I started back in 2017. And we really just have one idea, and that's to obtain feedback rapidly and respond to change. So that's part of our mission, is to help teams understand the importance of what self-managing means and having an empirical approach. So that's my email there. If you'd like to email me, you can be part of our community, and I'll send you a Slack invite. Some of my recent Scrum efforts outside of the training classes that I run, I've been practicing agility since about 2010. So most of that has been with the Scrum framework in place. The first three things that you see there are non-IT related efforts. And that first one, the Scrum Master for basically a manufacturing project, and that was their mission statement. That was their product goal, was to come up with a revolutionary building material. And yes, they got funding for that. Some other things, with the marketing team for a credit card promo, that was very interesting because it was mostly marketing focused, but not completely, because we had to figure out how we're going to integrate with some of the IT teams. I'm also working on a partnership with a couple other guys to help them take on that agile mindset. And another effort is to help a media producing company to come up with a DevOps culture and figure out what that means. I'm also heavily involved in helping our young adults and youth to take on Scrum and trying to implement it in our schools. And in general, I'm kind of a mentor to show people how to do that. There's my bio below that, all the formal stuff. Manufacturing background, mostly software development. I came up from the software development ranks, was a developer for over 20 years, but I still dabble in code here and there. So that's a little bit about myself. Hope to have a great session. Hope to have some really good questions to answer.
Hi, everyone. My name's Ben Thorp. I kind of went with a visual approach here for my bio. I received feedback once at a job interview that my resume made absolutely no sense. So I've done a lot of things and played a lot of different roles. So, came up as a software engineer, writing code, did a lot with, bits and bytes. And pretty quickly realized where my real passion it was in around creating work environments that really leverage the best in people, because one, it's the right thing to do. Two, it creates, drives better business results when you have, high performing teams, you've got a good culture, you've got good collaboration. And so I realized that was really where my passion was. So I kind of twisted, my software engineering background into this approach. So you can see there kind of halfway down the Scrum Master and Product Coach. Once I was exposed to the Scrum community, became a Scrum Trainer, started taking my Scrum Master positions, I've never gone back. Every position that I've had or role that I've been in, I show up as a Scrum Master, even if it's not my title. So it's something that sort of was embedded in me. Really that's my professional mission, and whatever role I happen to be in is, I say it down here in the mission, delivering product that matters, obsessing about customers, constantly learning, experimenting, and cultivating a culture of safety and cooperation. And what I like about Scrum is it's a value-based framework, based on the empirical process. So it really fits in with my own professional mission as well. So currently I am the VP of product development at EverCommerce in the home professional services. It's a SaaS company. So I'm running product development there. I'm supporting product development there for those couple of brands there. So yeah, that's it.
Fantastic, thank you. All right, so it is now time for a Q&A session. So everyone, please load your questions into the Q&A box, and I will start going through those. For those of you who just joined, your microphones are muted. So if you have a question, just enter it into the Q&A box. If you have any technical issues, please type those into the chat. So I'm going to stop sharing. Okay, so questions are starting to come in. So this question is about product ownership. So do you have any suggestions to convince the product owner to maximize the value of the product itself and not try to maximize the utilization of the Scrum team? Who wants to take that one? Go ahead, Ben.
Yeah, we're John and I are both like, who's gonna bite first? Yeah, that's a tough one. There's a Scrum answer to that, but I think this webinar is about being, practical ideas and thoughts around how to kind of address some challenges. What I would first want to understand is, how is this product owner currently being incentivized? In my experience, in a lot of environments, the product owner is actually incentivized for delivery, for shipping of features, for having a predictable delivery process. So as long as that is in place, a product owner might not be incentivized or connected to the value in the organization. Product owner, in quotes, means very different things depending on the organization. So they may not necessarily have what Scrum, sort of is in the framework, which is the product owner owns the actual final outcomes and final value. So I guess the suggestion is, one part, help the product owner understand the role, see if you can help make connections with key stakeholders who do own the value. And two, part of, if you're coming at this from a Scrum Master perspective, part of your role is to coach upward and outward into the organization. So one of the things you can do is create some transparency around this, and you can present, work with those key stakeholders and ask, hey, what would it be better if these software development teams were more plugged into the value statement? But that's not really much of an answer. I'm curious to hear what John has to say about it.
I actually liked your answer a lot, Ben. And I was going to say things along the same lines. I coach a lot of teams that's their first go-to from a product owner perspective, is to say, well, I want output from the team. So I totally understand where you're coming from. When I've been a Scrum Master on teams, what I do is I try to, allow the product owner to understand that they are concentrating on the what, on defining the what. And what I mean by that is take a lot of time to define what your purpose is for putting a product backlog item on your product backlog. And as Ben was saying, your main job as a product owner is to maximize the value of the product, right? And part of that is to identify value, right? What is value to your customer, your stakeholder, your user? What's value to you, and what's value to the team? What's going to help the team succeed into being the best self-managing team that they can? And really just start there, kind of separate the what from the how. So product owner is all about the what. The self-managing developers are about the how. So
Can I add something there?
Yeah, absolutely.
So as you were talking, it kind of made me think about different ways of defining value. And this also, you can start to nudge more of a factory, a delivery output-based team towards value by first, at least just starting with each backlog item, each in Scrum terms, product backlog item has some sort of value statement. And don't get wrapped up in has to be perfect or it has to be a pure slice of customer delivered value, but it's valuable to someone. It could be stakeholder value. It might be this thing is valuable to this stakeholder, even though we still might be somewhat disconnected from the final value. But that can start to get the product owner thinking in terms of the why for each of these items. The other piece is new-ish to the Scrum Guide, at least last year, was the idea of a product goal. And, there's different industry terms that are also being thrown around, like OKRs, objectives and key results, are another way of looking at this. But in the Scrum parlance, the product goal really defines a longer term objective. So if a product owner can work with the team and stakeholders, start defining these product goals, that can also help connect them to why are we even doing this? How does this even matter? We're doing more than just shipping piece parts. We're plugging into this overall objective that, hopefully is, some of these larger objectives, there's more clear tie to customer value or business outcome. So some additional ideas.
Awesome. Thank you both. Moving on. So could you explain the difference between test first and test driven?
I guess we would, I'm going to just assume that means test driven development and test first mindset. I'll go ahead and jump on that one. From the principle of what it's talking about, they're basically the same, having a test first mindset or test driven development. What's important to understand there is what is being tested. So let me just start with a test first mindset. Test first mindset is talking about what Ben was basically referring to with identifying value from a product goal perspective. And that is when you come up with the purpose of your goal, start thinking about, okay, well, how are we going to test that? Right? How are we going to test this purpose? And that's what a test first mindset is basically saying. Actually, Ben and I work with a guy at a bank here in Central Ohio. And during our refinement sessions, he would be the one that would say, that's great, but how are we going to test that? And us as developers would say, whoa, wait a minute, good question. So that's basically what I see as a test first mindset. Test driven development is basically the same as that test first mindset, in that you write the test, you watch it fail because there's no code to support it. You write the code to make the test pass, and then you refactor it to go according to your standards for quality. So that's kind of how I differentiate those two. Ben, anything to add there?
So just to summarize, test first, we're saying is more of a mindset around thinking, beginning with the end in mind, having an experimental mindset, whereas test-driven development is a specific technique used for to apply a test-first mindset, but also maybe more specific to it's a very specific software development technique that you can still use the test-first mindset, though even outside of software development. But I think that was a good summary.
Thanks, guys. Okay, next question comes from Jennifer. I am in a manufacturing environment where some leaders want to lean out the Scrum process. As a Scrum Master, I don't want to see the process leaned out. I think Scrum is lean enough. What are you seeing in other organizations?
Jennifer, thank you very much for that question. Coming from a manufacturing background, I know exactly what you're talking about. One thing you'll have to know, though, about Scrum is that, and it really isn't made too transparent, but Scrum, when it was first developed, was based on some lean principles. So I'm going to assume that when you say lean, you're talking about lean principles. That said, if you want to go towards Scrum, what I would ask you as a Scrum Master to do is to kind of take some time of why you think Scrum is the way to go. Especially if you think that it's to help you manage complexity, and you have a complex situation, then that's where probably you would want to use Scrum. That said, I would think that Scrum with Lean is a great way to go, because the very first Lean principle is to identify value and to map, and then second is to map the value stream, which, in Scrum, that's what we do. So take some time to kind of analyze why Scrum would be the right way to manage your complexity.
Yeah, the it depends answer is always, the dreaded answer on these calls. But I'll assume that, like you said, John, when we say lean out, what comes to mind for me, if somebody in a manufacturing environment, they want to reduce waste, if there's overhead, and that is I see this all the time in my work. There's a perception that Scrum can be, 20 years ago, it was perceived as a lightweight framework. Today, I do hear, well, it's a heavyweight framework, or it's wasteful. There's all these meetings. So I think what's important there is to demonstrate the value of each of those sessions, as far as the sprint planning session. What does that help us to do? Well, that helps us create focus during the sprint itself, so that we are all kind of working together on one thing, and we're not context switching. And you can relate these things back to, if people understand Lean, they might understand the concepts of flow, the concepts, more Kanban concepts. You can tie up the sprint review back to, well, we're making sure we're actually doing building the right things by engaging stakeholders frequently. So it might seem like just an extra meeting, but the intent here from a waste reduction perspective is make sure we're not waiting, 2-3 months to make sure we're building the right thing. So you can tie, in the retrospective itself, one thing you might want to consider is bring that to the team in a retrospective. Hey, our stakeholders or our management, they're, I'm hearing talk that Scrum is wasteful, or, there's too much involved here. What do we think? Are there aspects of how we're implementing Scrum that are wasteful? There's too much overhead. Take it to the team is sort of a common mantra amongst kind of the Scrum folks. So, don't be afraid to bring some of this input to the team directly and get their involvement in solving it.
Great, thanks. This next question, I am going to join a team whose main problem is receiving backlog items at the last minute to be included in the ongoing sprint. Any suggestion to correct and manage this problem is very welcome.
Another common thing that we deal with as Scrum Masters or being on a Scrum team. The way I'll start that is just by pointing out that one of the Agile principles is to welcome requirements even late in development. That said, the first thing I would ask is this thing that needs to be added part of the commitment of the sprint goal? Because one of the things in Scrum that we try and reinforce is that the sprint goal never changes during the sprint. However, the work can change. So first thing, look at the sprint goal. Does it line up with that? And if not, then work with the product owner to see how we can put this on the product backlog for a future sprint. If it does, then I would say that this comes to a take it to the team situation, where you would ask the team, okay, does this line up with our sprint goal? Yes. But then how can we work it in, depending on where we are in the sprint, to help us meet our goal? Or what can we take out of the sprint? Basically coach the team to figure out what it means to the sprint goal. So that's kind of where I would start with it, just knowing that the sprint goal is most important and the work is secondary. Anything to add to Ben?
John stole my answer, so then I had to scramble and think of something. So one additional thing, and this answer probably applies to a lot of these, real world issues that come along. Oftentimes, confronting these things in a combative way or a resistant way may, feel good in the moment, right? Because we know, like probably a lot of people on this call understand the impact of teams of constant context switching and not being able to focus, but others, they may not see the impact of that. So what I would suggest too is make it transparent. And one of the things that I like to do with teams, and this isn't, a Scrum specified practice, but I like to categorize all work. So you have different types of work item. You might have a bug, you might have a new feature, you might, and so, you can categorize the work. I always categorize something as unplanned. If it came in, after the sprint, after sprint planning and the sprint was, started, anything that comes in after, you can label it, tag it as unplanned, and simply, sometimes I'm amazed still to this day about simply displaying data. Hey, here's how the last 4 sprints of the work item type mix looks, and 50% of our work has been unplanned. And you could just leave it at that. And you can then start to talk about the impact of, as stuff comes in, we have to pivot and create context switching, which generates waste, but I think creating the transparency initially can be a good way of talking about the impact. You're having a conversation about what happened versus opinions and things like that. So.
And I absolutely love that. little tip you gave about making unplanned work transparent, categorizing that, I'm going to use that.
I charge a fee for that. So.
All right. So we are going to go back to the test first mindset. So can you please share some tips to develop a test first mindset, which makes it attractive for developers?
So I can talk about my own journey. Now, as far as how to influence developers, it's like good luck to all of us. The really good developers are also very, sometimes opinionated for good reason, and they have good reasons for doing things and not doing things. But it is a muscle, and it's not easy at first. And so just like anything else, like any other practice, there's initially an initial, sell. Hey, I'd like to, I think this is the benefit. Having a test first mindset, I think it will help us improve our quality. I think it will help us reduce the complexity of our solutions, because we're kind of discovering and teasing out the solution as we're writing these tests, X, Y, Z benefits to having a test first mindset. Here's a couple of things we could try. We can start writing our acceptance criteria in a product backlog item stated as a test case, so that your acceptance criteria becomes sort of a test plan. I'm using words that are maybe scary, but you got to move a PBI to done, and you go to the acceptance criteria, and I can check these things off and it meets the criteria. That's a test first mindset, so you can dip your toe into it. Run an experiment. Really, test first mindset is an experimental mindset. You're when you're running a test, you're going to try something, and you don't actually know what the outcome is going to be yet. And so you create a hypothesis, you run the test, you examine the results, and you inspect and adapt. And so it is a very scientific approach. It's a disciplined approach. And when you use the D word, when you use discipline, that means it does take practice and some commitment from the team to give it a try. So that's what I would recommend is run an experiment. Let's, for a couple of sprints, we're going to try these things, and then we'll see how it goes. Ultimately, you take it to the team, and they decide their practices. So anything else, John?
Yeah, I might as well share my journey with that as well. It's very similar to Ben's, make it empirical. When I was a developer and I was presented with a problem, my first instinct was I'm going to start forming a solution in my head. I'm going to go right to development. And what I quickly realized is that, I didn't think of that. I didn't think of that. And, starts creeping up on me. And then I realized, the problem isn't really well defined. So I had to keep going back and generating a feedback loop to say, okay, well, what do we need to do here? Then I finally realized that, we have to figure out how we're going to form this test first. And, Ben alluded to acceptance criteria. That's, something we had to play with on some teams where I was a developer, is to, figure out what the acceptance criteria is, because as Ben said, that becomes your test script. If you have well-formed acceptance criteria, that's a great complementary practice to Scrum to try and see how this acceptance criteria works, make it transparent on your user stories if that's what you're using, and inspect and adapt. That's a test first mindset, is to come up with a test script. I'll also borrow something that I learned from DevOps, being in a DevOps culture and trying to have that continuous testing mindset. The first way of DevOps is to, emphasize that the speed and efficiency of your system is more important than your little silo. So, developers actually have to come out of their development silo and start thinking about how this is going to affect the rest of the system. But yeah, as Ben was saying, make it empirical, make it transparent, so then you can inspect it and you can adapt to new ways. And as Ben says, I'm stealing his phrase again, chip away at it. It's going to take some time. It will take a lot of iterations to be able to start to get that muscle, as Ben says, going.
One other little tip, and this is something that I've started doing over the last few years, but I keep if you're in a position where you're in a coaching role, whatever your job title is, but your job is to help improve the performance of your teams. I keep sort of a backlog, notes of analogies, and it sounds silly, but I think kind of dumbing it down to something that most people can understand. So I was just thinking about, I did a home project, and I replaced all of our flooring with hardwood floors. And this is a big project, and you have to buy all the flooring up front. And so you have to sort of get it right. And so, how do I know that the flooring is what I want? So I started with, okay, well, the flooring needs to match the wall color. Okay, well, instead of, just going and buying all the flooring and picking the wall color, I ran a test. All right, I'm going to get a sample. I'm going to put it on the floor. I'm going to paint a little swatch of paint with this color, and I'm going to, make sure that that's what I want first. So I ran a test. Test number 2 was, I need to make sure the flooring is secure to the subfloor. I don't know what I'm doing. I've never put hardwood floor in before, but I ran a test. The test was, can secure this to the subfloor using these new tools that I developed. So, I mean, that might not be the best analogy, but I think that if you have a pool of those kind of floating in your mind, when you're, a lot of times these coaching teachable moments come up out of nowhere, and you need to be prepared with how to kind of walk through the mindset piece of it. So
Great. Thank you. This next question is very much related to this whole topic. So it comes from Jimena, and we are using user stories in our sprints. The team verifies the user stories to make sure that they comply with INVEST, which is an acronym in all caps. So we might need, I don't know if you guys are familiar with that, and has an acceptance criteria. However, for some reason, the dev team does not want to test each user story and wait for the whole MVP. I think there's something wrong here. Have you had this situation at some point? How did you find a solution?
So just to, again, we had to make some assumptions in this sort of format around the question itself. So, INVEST. So a point of, just for others on the call that may not know, and I'm going to have to look this acronym up probably. INVEST is an acronym used to help guide the crafting of a user story that, INVEST. I forget what they are. Maybe we can share a link there.
It in. Independent, negotiable, value, estimable, small, testable.
Greg Porter. Thank you, Greg Porter.
Thank you, Greg.
Yeah, so it's a very common technique. It's very useful for creating user stories that are those things that have a value associated with them and can be delivered, in incremental pieces. So if I get the question, it was the team doesn't want to test the full user story. Did I get that correct?
Yes. Does not want to test each user story.
Each user story. So ultimately, the team has maybe a different understanding of what they're accountable for than you do, Jimena. So, or maybe people in leadership. So I think, this might be a situation where we just need to realign on what the team is accountable for ultimately, which is the final delivery of value. And that means, each piece part that we're delivering, we are also responsible for that quality. So the Scrum answer to this is the definition of done is a tool here to use. So maybe for now, the definition of done doesn't include this full end-to-end full testing of each story, but you can add that in incrementally over time, and that expands the team's accountability to the next thing the team is delivering fully functional, fully tested user value in each product backlog item. But so that definition of done can expand over time to increase the accountabilities. But it's a tough one. Do you have anything, John?
I'll start my answer by taking it from where you had the tail end there, and that is the definition of done. I mean, the Scrum Guide even says, and I'm quoting it right now, looking it up, the definition of done is a formal description of the state of the increment when it meets the quality measures required for the product. So we're talking about quality here, and I mean, this is a commitment for the increment. So I would say that this is the main thing you should be focusing on, is your commitment for the increment of the definition of done. If there's certain user stories that aren't being tested, then I would question, why? Is it not meeting the definition of done, or is it just because we're too good to be on this team and test stuff? It could be a myriad of reasons. I just picked a couple. But that's where kind of I would go, and I would just say that the practices that I heard in the question of user story, invest, all these are complementary practices to the real thing, which is the definition of done. So I would kind of question that first and say, well, are we meeting the quality standards for our product? I mean, the Scrum team is empowered to make those decisions. So that's kind of where I would start.
Definition of done is so core to Scrum and creating transparency, delivering quality, and really it's one of the key tools in your toolbox as a Scrum Master to create true professional, product development teams that deliver high quality. Invest, user stories, all acceptance criteria, these are all great, but let's be honest, this could be written on a napkin. This could be a conversation, this could be on a note card, but ultimately it's the final product quality that really matters. And that, means that the team really is on the hook for ensuring the quality per the definition of done. So yeah, just kind of adding plus oneing what you said there, John.
Great, thanks. Here's a question. So any advice for anyone who wants to get into Scrum but doesn't work in an IT environment?
Well,
kind of a broad question, but
it is.
You have some examples that you could share.
Yeah. I mean, in my bio, the last three products that I worked on were non-IT related. Knowing that Scrum is used to, generate value through adaptive, complex problems, I would start there. I would say, okay, well, is Scrum right for this situation? Do you really have a complex problem? And what I've used is what we use in class. I either use a Cynefin diagram or a Stacy diagram. Basically measure your what with your how. I'm using my arms as axes here. And if you are kind of far from agreement as to what the business value is needed and kind of away from how you would do that, then you're probably in a complex situation. That's where I would start. And then from there, figure out what your product goal is. What's your mission? What's your vision? Why are you doing what you're doing? Start from there. And if you've ever been involved as a Scrum Master building a team, then the other pieces, kind of fall into place as to forming the team, forming a definition of done, figuring out your cadences and all that kind of stuff for your events. Kind of a broad answer for a broad question, but that's usually how we start. That's how we started on this come up with a revolutionary building material product goal.
There's a lot of ways you can get started. I think there's different mindsets around this too. There's the, push everybody into the water at the same time mindset, where we do this big change together and everyone's bought in and we're moving to Scrum all at once. There's the incremental mindset, which, I've actually had more lasting success with. And this is what I recommend for, especially if you're in an environment where Scrum isn't well understood, outside of software product development, for example, there's a couple places you can start. First thing is just make the work transparent. So just, put your work on a board. And this is where, if you want to become sort of a student of Kanban can be a good place to start dipping your toe in, but make the work transparent and get into a cadence, so you don't have to set up all the Scrum events at once and define the definition of done. And, you don't have to go through this heavyweight transformation. You can start small, start with your daily Scrum and a retrospective. And you could just start with that, and then at your retrospectives, that's your chance to say, okay, what didn't go well? What could we add? Well, we really need to get our key stakeholders more involved. Well, how about we start a sprint review? So you can sort of iterate yourself into a Scrum implementation from there if there's not sort of widespread buy-in or understanding. So.
Okay, thank you. I just want to add a little side note to our audience. We're trying to get through as many questions as we can. I noticed some are coming into the chat. If you could please move those over to the Q&A, that'll be a better way for us to capture those as I weave through these questions. So thank you, I would appreciate that. This next question comes from Leonardo. It's regarding estimation. So what do you think about estimations in Scrum? Do you think that estimating using story points is a good way based on your experience?
Well,
this might be known as what you might call a hand grenade question.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking, Ben. Yeah, there's a lot of complexities in the question, as Ben and I have already kind of talked about. When it comes to estimation, story points is great. Anything that's not absolute and more of a relative estimation is better. And let me tell you what I mean by that. The reason why we use relative estimation in Agile in general is to use empiricism. So it's an empirical approach to estimating. So basically, compared to this piece of work that was already done, what is this piece of work going to be compared to the size and complexity of that first thing that was already done? Okay, so it's comparing it, right? Is it more? Is it about the same? Is it less? Right? And one thing to know about estimation is that in general, my feeling is that estimation is a waste. And the reason why I say that is because we're trying to meet sprint goals, and the act of estimating, in my feeling, is more of an activity that you want to spend as least amount of time as possible and just use it for planning. So for this PBI, for example, can we fit it in a sprint? That's about it. You might have heard about the hashtag no estimates movement. If you could look that up, that's kind of what we're talking about here. So yes, story points is okay. I try to get away from as many metrics for the team to use as possible, but you have to chip away at it. Ben, anything to add there?
I'll pull up from the Scrum guide here, since we're on a Scrum.org call. This is kind of supporting what you said, John. Various practices exist to forecast progress, like burn ups, burn downs, or cumulative flows. While proven useful, these do not replace the importance of empiricism. In complex environments, what will happen is unknown. Only what has already happened may be used for forward-looking decision-making. So the estimation piece can be useful. What we try to go for is to make it empirical, to make it based on things that we already have learned, from our past. The act of estimation as a technique can be useful in that it gets the team members, around the quote table, and to really dig into some of the details and refine that. So a lot of interesting discoveries can be made when a team is trying to do an sort of an estimation exercise. In the pure sense, and I will also agree with John here, in the pure sense, estimation is waste. It's not directly contributing to the product development itself. So teams need to kind of use it as it can be a useful waste. I don't know if that's an oxymoron, but it can be useful, but it's something that we need to look at, make sure we're not spending too much time trying to, crystal ball gaze. There's a question beneath the question, maybe. I don't want to read too much into it. And it's how do we share our estimates, and how do our stakeholders, or how does the organization use our estimates for forecasting, for team performance measurement? That's a whole nother webinar. But the core answer here is this is used by the team internally to do forecasting and work refinement. So.
Awesome, thank you. This next question comes from Claire. I think it might others might relate to this one. I'm working with a team where the product owner has been assigned too many projects, too much work. So our team has been struggling. Any advice on how to explain and convince management of the value of the product owner's time without negatively impacting this highly valuable person?
So I'll just restate the question here. Was it specifically around the product owner has too many projects and too much work? So we need to convince management that the product owner needs more time to spend on their product ownership duties.
The value of their time.
The value of the product owner's time. Sure.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a tough one. And I've seen this oftentimes the product owner is extremely busy. They might only have a few hours a week to spend with the teams, and they have additional responsibilities outside of just the core Scrum team activities. So I'll give my sort of canned answer, and maybe John has some more better ideas. Make it transparent if possible. So you can share the findings, scrubbed findings from a retrospective upward. We can say, we needed the product owner's time here, but we couldn't because she was too busy. And this caused us to sort of have a lot of rework. We had work items. This is where you can start to bring in some lean and Kanban metrics. We had work items that were sitting in progress for 5, 6, 8, 10 days while they waited for a product owner to review it. You can capture all that. That's data you can capture and sort of present upward. So we need, so I think being transparent around the issue, coming with data, if there is any data, and how might it be different if you had the product owner's full engagement. So sorry if that's a generic answer. That's kind of sort of that would be one that we need to dig in over coffee for a little while, I think.
Great.
Yeah, Ben, you oh, sorry, Lindsay, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, Ben stole my answer this time. What you want to do first is start to make that kind of, make that transparent. Right. And to add to Ben's answer, I would also bring up the fact that context switching is actually very detrimental to any team where you're switching teams or switching contexts. As a matter of fact, if you're working 50% in one area and 50% another, you're actually decreasing each of those by 20 to 25%. So you're actually only about 25 to 30% effective in each area. But make that transparent, and definitely bring it up in a retrospective.
Okay, this question, again, it's another broad question, but I think you both might be able to provide some great advice. So how do you motivate a team that went through a rough time?
This is something I bet, I don't, want to be presumptuous, but I bet many or most of us have experienced over the last 18, 24 months.
Absolutely.
It has been a tough time for many of us. And, I've experienced this very directly. It's, all of us have our own 2020 stories, 2021 stories, pandemic stories. We're still trying to be productive. We're working from home. I think if you're in a position of, again, I'll say whatever your title is, if you're in a position of leadership, the most important thing is to have empathy and really just understand the plight of the individual on the team. It's not your job. It's nobody's job in Scrum or outside of Scrum to fix a person. So as a leader, you need to just have empathy, understand, what's going on. So that's my, hope that's not too soapboxy type of an answer, but that's what I've appreciated when I was maybe going through some struggles myself is, if leadership is understanding, so I think that just having that space, it's okay to have struggles in a tough time, just have space. Second answer, leverage the Scrum framework. Don't give up on your retrospectives. Use your retrospectives. I know in the industry, and this is something I've seen, retrospectives become very mechanical. They become, well, we have to generate our action item. Retrospective isn't useful unless it's generating an action item. And we're always, positive action, chipping away, continuous improvement. That's great. But the retrospective serves another purpose, and that is a release valve. And, for the team who might be going through some tough issues, it's also culture building, especially if you're in a distributed team environment where people aren't meeting in person. Having that human connection can make some of these tough times a little, easier to navigate. So really, I would say, put some time into those retrospectives, and use the framework. I guess I would do 2.2 B answer, use the framework, clear goals. The product goal is great. I'm so excited about that addition to the Scrum guide. Ambiguity is the enemy. When it comes to being in a tough time, people need some clarity. They need to be able to focus on something. So, leverage the framework, work with your product owner, define the goals, have real clear, concise sprint goals, and so that people can, contribute. So sorry, I went a little long there. John?
That was a great answer, Ben. Just to add to what Ben was saying, I actually was looking at some data regarding this, big old job frenzy that we have going on now. And on one site, the number one reason why people were leaving their jobs was because they simply didn't feel appreciated. It really wasn't many other things that reached the top, but that was the number one thing. And one thing you can do as a leader, like Ben was saying, to help a team through a tough time is to just tell them how appreciated they are. having that empathy is just so important. And, like Ben was saying, use those retrospectives, use them the best you can. I have been recently getting into some liberating structures with retrospectives, and it's been actually very effective to know that, hey, okay, let's look at the product goal, let's look at how we did the sprint and everything like this. But some other things were coming out, if you break out into groups for whatever reason, you come together and you start seeing some commonalities. It's like, well, we're burnt out, and those are the times when you really, there's reasons why the retrospective is just with the team, and it's usually in a closed room. Take that time, make it effective. And what can we do to have the company facilitate our needs, to let them know that we're doing some important stuff here. We're doing a lot of hard stuff here. Make that transparent. Bring that into your sprint backlog. That's where I would start.
Great, thank you so much. Felt like that was an important question. So we have time for like one more here, and I see a ton of requests coming in through the chat to answer questions that were submitted. I'm going through them I'm pulling questions that answer multiple answers. But I am going to be sharing all of the questions with John and Ben after this. So they will be able to address them afterward with you. So don't worry, your question will be answered. It just might make this session. So this last question here, it hits a few that were asked that are similar. So what's the best way to facilitate a team through Scrum sprints where they do not really know how to use Scrum or not very well? Should we train people first or try to teach as we go? And this question is for non-developer teams. And there was a similar question that came in for non-IT.
So if I'm understanding the question correctly, Ben, and please chime in, I think it's really about adopting Scrum. Should we use training first, or should we just, go, kind of go with
Should
it?
learn as we go, like how do we get these folks up to speed?
Being a Scrum trainer, I'm always going to say, yeah, you need training. I mean, that's the easy answer. That said, and it's about maximizing the value of the people who need to learn Scrum and practice Scrum. I've been practicing Scrum, like I said, since 2010, and I'm learning something every day still. That said, getting up to speed is really kind of a broad term. I will use something that I've used in the past of the forming, storming, norming, performing. Forming the team and being able to maybe go through mechanical Scrum with whatever process they're using now is probably a good way to start if you decide not to do training. Even what I like about the APS class is we put the sprints to practice, and we allow you to work on a case study where you get to practice Scrum. And the most important part of that first sprint is to realize that the value is most important. What we deliver is most important because we generate that feedback. So, even if I train other teams to just deliver something small, because what you're trying to do is you're trying to build that trust with your stakeholders. So even if it's just a little hello world application, that's going to be important because they're going to give you feedback saying, hey, you delivered something. It's kind of worthless, but you delivered something, as opposed to, oh, we're going to take several sprints now to give you nothing, right? What kind of trust are you really building with your stakeholders? So form the team, start to storm on your product, go from there. And take the APS course.
Okay.
Yeah, I think just creating, I would add to John's answer, find some allies. So you don't want to enter into a change situation as a lone warrior, so find some allies, find a sponsor, someone who's in leadership or a respected position, kind of build that. That could be a good way to start as well. Even if training is fantastic way to start, it really is. Even if you don't, this isn't trying to sell. If you want to pull together your own, training, fine, but have some sort of kickoff training and then just get started. And it will feel mechanical. You use a great term there, John. Will feel mechanical at first, kind of going through the motions. But again, it's, like if you're learning karate or taekwondo, you're going through the motions until it becomes second nature. So.
Awesome. Thank you both so much. So we are at our time. There are many unanswered questions. Thank you all for your patience. I tried to jump around a little bit, and all of these are going to be shared, as I mentioned before. So we will figure out a way to get them all addressed. So thank you so much, John and Ben. I thought this was a great session. And
Lindsay.
I think, I hope the audience, I hope you all got a lot out of this. So as always, we encourage you to continue your learning. So please check out the free resources on our website, and feel free to reach out to Ben or John with any lingering questions that you have. And I hope you all have a great rest of your day or evening, and scrum on.
Thanks, Lindsay. Thanks, John.
Thank you,
Enjoyed it.
Lindsay. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.